Thank you guys so very much for being here this evening. We greatly appreciate the time that you've carved out of your busy schedules to be here for a very important conversation this evening. We like to have these opportunities to engage with our community about these very important topics, and especially the topics that we communicated with you about that we'd be covering this evening. And really tonight is about partnerships. And, we like to think of this continuous circle of partnerships, and we know that there's two main components to that partnership, and one would be, of course, the school system, and then the partnership that exists with us, along with our public safety, our law enforcement partners. But the third part to that circle is you guys and your participation in making sure that we have the most safe and welcoming school environments for our students and our staff members day in and day out. So thank you guys for your commitment to that and being a part of that this evening. Now, I have two representatives from two of those portions of that circle, if you will. Representing our school board is our board chair, Mrs. Holly Cobb from District 3. And then we also have from the Sheriff's Office, one of our great partnerships with the Sheriff's Office is Colonel Yarbrough from the Henry County Sheriff's Office. So the two of them will come out. I'm going to welcome them, and then we're going to hear from them. And then at the very end of this evening, we're going to get a chance to break off into some groups and hear from you guys, okay? Sound good? All right. Well, let me welcome now our board chair, Mrs. Holly Cobb, and representing the Henry County Sheriff's Office, we have Colonel Yarbrough. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Good evening. Just want to take this opportunity to welcome you to our community conversation. We appreciate you taking the time in your busy schedules to make a commitment to learn more about how you can partner with us, the school system. You may know that one of our Board of Education's core beliefs and commitments says that all of our learning environments will be supportive, safe, and secure. And that core belief and commitment really guides a lot of the work that we do as a school system. It guides a lot of the investments that we make, and we truly are committed to that. And one of these commitments really is partnering with you, our community, because we do view us all as a big team on behalf of our students. And so we really appreciate you coming out tonight to really partner with us, engage with us. We want to hear from you. So I hope you leave tonight with some valuable information that will be shared by our esteemed panel this evening, and I also hope that you feel like your voices were heard, because we really want you to give you an opportunity to have your voices and concerns heard. So hope you leave tonight again with some great information, and just knowing that we want to partner with you on behalf of all of our students. So thank you all for being here.
Good evening. I'm Mike Yarbrough with the Henry County Sheriff's Office. We're so very excited to be with you here tonight. It is absolutely essential that we all work together, from our students to our parents to our staff at the schools and our wonderful teachers, as well as our sheriff's office, that we make sure that we are looking at your campus security and helping to understand what we can do best to protect our children, our youth, in the online environments that we're all dealing with, and also to make those choices that we've so intently seen this past week in the loss of two of our law enforcement officers throughout Henry County and Jackson County. And when those decisions and those pathways are taken to understand how we can guide our youth better, so we don't see the ends of lives and those that end up in our prison system, so we can redirect people to the positive behaviors and those outcomes that we know we want for our kids and for our future. And the only way we can do that together is the great partnership that we continue to maintain here with our school system, our sheriff's office, and absolutely the people in our community that will work with us. Thank you for being here tonight.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. We're ready to get things going, and you're going to see our panelists file out behind me right here. I do want to draw your attention as you came into the auditorium, this beautiful facility this evening, that there are two words that should be together, and they usually are together, but for spacing purposes, we have them spread apart, but better together. And that's the sentiment that we have, existing when we get these opportunities to work with you guys on solutions for our school system. So, with that being said, I do have have the opportunity now to introduce you to all of our panelists this evening, and I'm going to scoot to the side over here, and I'm going to start down here to my far left, and as I call them out, they'll be able to wave to you. But we have joining us also from the Henry County Sheriff's Office, we have over our School Resource Officer unit, we have Lieutenant Michael Agan. All right, moving right along, we have our Executive Director of School Leadership and Operations. We have Mr. Gabe Creary. We have our Supervisor of Safety, Mr. Johnny Stafford. And we have two principals representing all of our principals here this evening, but we have one from our elementary ranks and one from our secondary ranks. Representing our elementary ranks, Timber Ridge Elementary's principal, Ms. Kristen McCrae. We also have representing the secondary and, of course, our high school principals. We have Mr. Antonio Mattox from McDonough High School. Moving right along, we have Mr. Jeff Rader, our Director of Social Work Services. Then we have Ms. Jessica Stormer, who's our Executive Director of Family and Student Services. And then moving on down the line, we have Dr. Sean Hesser, our Director of Advisement and Counseling. And last, but certainly not least, we have the leader of Henry County Schools. We have Superintendent Dr. Mary Elizabeth Davis. I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you. I think I've got a mic, but thank you for that introduction, JD, and thank you, Mrs. Cobb, and also I know here is Mrs. Edwards, our Vice Chair of the Board of Education, for partnering with Colonel Yarbrough in the introductions, but we could not be more thankful for the time you've carved out to have a conversation. We do have some planned remarks as a part of this panel, and I'm going to ask some questions and really just provide some insights into the techniques and strategies already being deployed in our schools around the topics of safety and personal well-being for young people. But the most important part of our night together, it comes when we start hearing your perspectives about what's next. Believe it or not, it was 4 years ago. 4 years ago in the Performing Arts Center in McDonough, before this beautiful Performing Arts Center stood here, we actually gathered as a community. I actually see some of the same faces in the community right here in this meeting right now. It was sadly following the Parkland tragedy in Florida. We knew we needed to have a moment. We came together as a community and thought deeply about a very purposeful plan to elevate our awareness around campus security and the way we keep one another safe and our young people safe. And in that actual environment, 800 people participated, and we had breakout conversations around the room, if you can imagine, really listening for all of the recommendations from the perspectives of parents and students and community members. And out of that came a very clear roadmap of investment in campus security, as well as in practices and processes that just needed to shift so that we were all attending to the safety of our youth. Well, I'm proud to say what we put on that list became accomplished, and we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. Mr. Stafford in particular will illuminate many of those things. But today we can accept the world has changed a little bit, even since those 4 years ago. And it's probably the right time to come back together as a community and think about our campus's security and the personal well-being of our young people. So we hope that this dialogue is the beginning of a conversation that is ongoing, as it always needs to be. And I know that the individuals that make up the Henry County team really actually do believe that every single child should feel like they belong in their school community, feel connected to a caring adult, and know that they are safe. And I believe we only do that, accomplish that, when we do it together. So let's get into our conversation. Are we ready? All right, hearing the round of applause, I'm gonna get this going. So we actually have thought about campus safety and personal well-being in 3 distinct categories that we're gonna move throughout in our conversation. We're gonna start and talk about the reality of COVID and the conditions in our community that have impacted how we stay safe and healthy at school. We're going to also then talk about digital and social media safety, and we have a lot of thoughts on that, and we can't wait to really just illuminate that conversation. And then we're also going to go ahead and talk about the specific campus security techniques and the student well-being practices that you would experience as a student in Henry County Schools. And after our conversation, we're going to break up into those same small group conversations, and we're going to learn what's next to build the next roadmap for our young people. Ready? I think we get to start by talking just about the reality of the conditions we have navigated, and that has been really consumed by the presence of COVID-19. And Jessica, you have really led our response and management plan, and I would love for you to just talk a little bit about what do you see today in COVID? What do you expect to be changing on the horizon regarding our COVID management techniques? Let me toss it to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Davis, and thank everybody for coming out tonight. It certainly is a pleasure to be here with you together in the same room. And so, as Mary Elizabeth mentioned, we have always been dedicated to providing a safe learning environment for our students. And if you had asked me just 3 years ago, Jessica, would you be thinking about this while you are managing a worldwide pandemic and its impact on a local school system? And I would have told you that was science fiction. But yet that is our reality. And so the reality now is that we have experienced a pandemic that has touched all of our lives. And so that also includes our staff, our students, our families. We've all experienced loss of connection, loss of relationships, loss of loved ones. We've all been impacted in different ways in our lives. And yet we are determined to make sure that our learning environments are safe and that our students continue to have the opportunity to learn despite anything that's going on in our community, and that we do that in the safest way possible. And it's been my pleasure to work for a school system who was committed from day one to organize the systems and processes that are required to do this in a meaningful way. You could stay in a period of response as we move through these phases of crisis and recovery. None of us know what the next day brings with this pandemic, but we know, as Mary Elizabeth mentioned, that we're better when we do this together and we do it in an organized fashion, and we have managed to do that. Unfortunately, it doesn't take the results and the effects of the pandemic away, but what it does mean is that when we all band together, we can provide learning in a safe environment for our students so that they can still achieve their goals and dreams. So we had to do that. We had to learn in the middle of crisis, which sometimes is difficult. You have to be really intentional to learn during a crisis. We were able to do that through systems and developing a layered mitigation system that we developed through learning and through close consultation with our health community. That involves being really intentional about communications, facilities, sanitization, making sure that we're monitoring the symptoms, making sure our staff is trained to identify symptoms and how to respond to those. And what I'd really like to key in to is our daily monitoring practices. So monitoring COVID-19 requires really intentional proactive monitoring. This is not passive monitoring of numbers. It is intentional proactive monitoring of the daily conditions that impact our community. So we talk about Henry County is situated within a state, the state within the nation, and of course our local school system right here. And so we monitor numbers on every single level, and there are action steps that we take as we're monitoring those numbers. And so we've been able to track those. And if you've been following closely since the beginning of the pandemic, we organized a local dashboard so that we could track just within our local community what was happening with the conditions of COVID-19 for every school, for every cluster, and for our entire system. And we make daily decisions based on those numbers. And so as we're tracking every single case, one thing that we learned in tracking the cases is that transmission occurs most frequently outside of school walls, hands down. Schools are one of the safest places students can be. That is because we do have mitigation efforts in place, layered mitigation efforts in place that many other places just don't have. They just don't have the ability to implement all of those mitigation systems at once that we are implementing and that we have learned from. And so we've learned that daily monitoring is a highly effective practice, and that the layered mitigation efforts, once we know what those are, we can apply those at different levels, and now we're primed to do that. The next thing we've learned is that students need to be in school. They need to be connected to their teachers. They need to be connected to their peers, to caring adults that help them along their way, that students thrive when they have multiple positive connection points. So that they can achieve each of their individual goals and dreams. And then I want to talk a little bit more about the monitoring, which is, as we're monitoring the conditions and what we've known, just even on a local level, you hear the research that schools are not the place where transmission happens. But we know that on a local level, because we do adhere to our daily monitoring practices, we document every single case, we know exactly what happens with every single case. And then as we're monitoring the conditions, since this happened, there have been 3 clear waves of COVID-19 what we call spikes in COVID-19 transmission. The Department of Public Health has an excellent dashboard that I do recommend that you check out, and it's very useful. The most interesting difference in this past wave, so we're on the very end of our 3rd wave, so we're really thankful for that. But what we did see in this 3rd wave was a spike in the ages of 0 to 17 COVID-19 infections. And you won't see that in the previous 2 waves. So that was really interesting in this past wave is what included the Delta variant. So that was an interesting data point for us as we were considering, how to mitigate this, how do we respond, how do we then, so that students can learn in every single classroom. And the last thing I want to talk about is vaccination. And we know that vaccination is one of the most effective mitigation tools. Of course, this is a personal health decision for you and your family to have in consultation with your medical provider. Vaccines now available for students as early as 5 years old. And so we do encourage you to have a meaningful conversation with your healthcare provider to decide if that is something that is right for you and your family. And something else we're really proud of is that Henry County Schools was the only school district that was able to pull off, organize, and run our very own closed pod point of distribution site for COVID-19 vaccines. And we were able to provide access to vaccination for just under 3,000 of our employees. So we're really proud of that. I thought that was really a demonstration of our commitment to make sure that any employee who wanted it had access to a vaccination. And so we continue to follow medical advancements, and we're also following the news that there may be an antiviral pill on the horizon that could be another effective treatment. Of course, still medical decisions and approvals that have to take place, but as the medical community advances their response, we will continue to look at our protocols and make adjustments to our protocols in concert, with our medical community.
It's pretty amazing, actually. As Jessica's talking, I'm thinking that she's really summarizing 20 months of absolute intense and relentless responsibility. But we did remain committed that as the public institution for our community, we must be accessible to the youth of our public. And closing schools and cutting off that access that is not what communities need, and it's not what kids need. And I think the reason we take a minute to set that stage is because it's actually amplified so many other of the experiences our young people have had that then inform each of these other topics that we're going to talk about. Because navigating those 20 months was real, and we are very attentive to how young people have returned into our school environments. So, Sean, I want to actually jump over to you, and I want to actually start talking about what do we see from your area of expertise as the national picture that really kind of resembles what our young people's decision-making patterns look like today, and kind of kick us off, take it from the COVID conversation to the national picture of kids.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, and I'm so thankful to be here tonight because I too have a student. I have a graduate from Henry County Schools, and so I understand the importance of this conversation as a parent. And so I'm very grateful to talk about some of the things that we've seen and some of the startling statistics that as a parent, I'm sure you guys would definitely want to know about what we've seen in 20 months.
I know it. 20
long months and what has occurred. And I'll start nationally, like Dr. Davis said, in a national study showed that half of the adults with children expressed a concern about their child's personal health, including their mental health, meaning anxiety attacks, panic attacks that have come since we've started this 20 months. Also, last year, being transported by an ambulance due to actions of self-harm increased 22% nationally, 22%. That's a lot of students. And then also, which is very disheartening to me, is that suicide is the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 34 years old. And so as a parent and as a employee of Henry County Schools, that's just something we just don't want to hear, and we don't want to see another increase in that. Another statistic is that we learned this year that over 140,000 students nationally have lost a loved one, a significant loved one, a guardian, a parent, a grandparent in the home. And that's a statistic that hurts our children daily as we interact with them. That's the grief that they carry throughout the day. Another statistic that we have even locally is that our student health survey revealed last year an increased number of students who indicated self-harm, that they were thinking of self-harm. And that's tragic for us and the things that we do in Henry County to really help our students. So that's going in opposition to all of this great work and all of the academic achievement we're trying to do here in Henry County and nonstop learning. Another statistic is that the children who reported self-harm, they're in our schools. When you talk about locally, that's local statistics that we learned from our health survey. And so as staff members, and definitely our department, student services, we do focus on the student and the whole child, your children. And so here we have care teams that we've employed this year to ensure that our students are connected, like Ms. Stormer said, to a caring adult in the building. And we know that research has shown us that a relationship with a caring adult does mitigate or reduce anxiety for students. They feel more connected. They're willing to listen and achieve and learn at greater numbers. And that's national research as well. We want to make sure that our students are connected to sports and activities. We have Mr. Creary here, who is over our entire athletic program for the district, and ensuring that our students are connected, that when they leave us, they still have hopes and dreams and aspirations to go beyond what they're hearing and experiencing for 20 months. For us, 20 months is long, but just think about it in a kid who likes to get out and be active and do things. 20 months is like 5 years. If you're a teenager or a little one, that's a lot to handle. Our care teams have been amazing. They've been contacting students. We have our virtual learners as well. And so we make sure that they're connected to other individuals and other adults, whether that's also a peer mentor, they're connected to them as well. And so those are definitely things that we are very proud of in Henry County, that we're making sure that our students are heard and that they know that they are seen and they know that they are loved and cared for in Henry County, which hence our Henry Cares campaign across the district. We have a few things we like to tell parents to make sure they're checking in with their students. They're checking those cell phones. They're keeping an eye out on just different messages, what they're taking in internally. If you're a parent who loves to watch the news, we try to tell you guys to limit that to maybe not in the morning, afternoon, and at night, to try to limit that intake for your students to maybe once a day, because they're listening and they're hearing everything that we're doing. So if you're one of those parents who just watches CNN all day, maybe let's limit that just a tad bit so that we can actually go for walks and experience outdoors. Like today is a beautiful day. So we really employ parents when we have our parent meetings, and principals will probably talk about coffee chats. When we have those, we really want to just make sure you guys know your kids talk about you during the day and they want to spend time with you and they want you to ask them how you're feeling on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being, I'm worried about everything in the universe. 1 being, I'm ready to take this day on. And so making sure you're having those conversations, or even sitting down eating dinner, even though today they can't eat dinner with them right now, but definitely thinking about things to do with your students to really engage them in a conversation. I think Ms. McCray is going to talk about holding them captive in the car. They can't leave and have those conversations with them. Not that they're trapped, but just it's an opportunity to really see what's going on internally, mentally, emotionally with your student. And so those are some of the things that we suggest all the time for our parents.
Well, I love that. I'm going to tell you, I want to warn you, we believe we can be the community that disrupts those statistics. And it starts with these types of environments where we come together in conversation, but we can't help but share with a level of conviction some of the observations we are making around the experiences young people have navigating their day. And so you've brought up a couple of the tips of really how we might be purposeful in our interactions with young people. I think you're going to need to prepare yourself for those tips to actually strengthen as we get to a few more panelists, and really seeing through the eyes of how their daily experiences walk into schools, and how we want to be a really honest partner in how we can do better for kids together. But Jeff, let's talk a little bit about how so much of what we just see, it really is revolving around something in your hand, and that's a device. And we're worried about the amount of time kids are consuming mature content on devices. Jeff, why don't we just toss it to you? Let's just start the conversation about devices, and tell me a little bit about some of the growing concerns you have, some of the risky behavior that results, and what from your field, which is really overseeing our social workers, what are you seeing?
Yeah, and thank you for letting me be here. As a social worker, it has been very alarming what we've seen in terms of social media. I was going to ask who's checked their social media since they've been here, but I'm not going to do that to you. But during the pandemic, we knew that we saw a huge increase in kids being on social media, being at home, right? Well, nationally, 10% of individuals have a social media addiction. 40% of young adults have insufficient sleep due to social media. Teens who spend more than 5 hours a day on social media platforms are twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression. And then we go back into like our schools. I know just today I talked to 2 social workers who were dealing with issues in terms of kids that were having problems related to social media. But we see kids who are having a lack of ability to focus. Of course, we see the bullying. One thing that's really interesting to me is eating disorders nationally have been on the rise. And you can think that could be the unattainable aspirations that kids have when they're looking on Instagram or TikTok. We know that we see, the very scary one is kids who send pictures, right? So they send a picture to someone, they don't realize the level of what they're doing is a crime. And so we're seeing that in our schools, which is really, really scary. And to transition that, I think, as I was kind of joking here, but, who checked their social media. But as a family, some ideas is, hey, we're all going to put our phones up at the same time. It's hard for us, right? It's hard for us to keep our phone in our pocket and put it away. But as a family, at dinner, we're going to put this up. Or at 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, all the phones go here, and they're going to go somewhere in the house where no one can get them. That you have an unset kind of rule that, or a set rule, that I can go through your phone at any time. That's a battle, right? But if you set that up even early on, I can go through your phone at any time if I come to you, and you could even set that up with a reward. Hey, everything was great. Here is a reward for your phone being great, but I can go through your phone at any time. And that just because you follow your kids, they're way smarter than us, right? You're not following your kids, and they're on all kinds of stuff. They may set up something just so you can follow it, and they can keep you quiet. And so privacy settings, and just because kids don't really understand that your privacy setting doesn't mean that you're safe, right? So some kids think that, I've got these privacy settings on, but you're still not safe. So those are just a few tips. But I think the biggest one I would say is if everybody as a family can put that up, right? And we know we have those great conversations. If someone's talking to us eye to eye and listening to us, we feel more connected. But if we're down on our phone, as adults and kids, so even kind of modeling that for our kids is a great idea.
Yeah, I think that sleep statistic, I want to repeat it. You said 40% of young people have sleep deficiencies because of their involvement with their device.
Absolutely.
And if you're thinking, well, fortunately, that's not my child, and I'm thinking about car rider line. I'm thinking that every other car has a child walking into the school facility not ready to learn because of a lack of sleep. And that's not as big of a concern to me as it is that your brain develops when you are sleeping. And healthy adults have had healthy childhoods that are filled with adequate sleep. And so, yes, this does relate to learning, but it also relates to how we're growing up our next generation of healthy youth who will be healthy adults. And so we see there being some opportunity to really just expand how widely we talk about what types of impacts we see our young people experiencing. But while all of that is really concerning, very quickly, Lieutenant Agan, this actually becomes a matter that our law enforcement officials tend to experience quicker than a kid can even imagine that happening. So we've talked about some of the more innocent, more playful ways, and a couple of maybe poor choices that happen. How does it end up in your hands, Lieutenant Agan, when social media activity or digital use becomes out of hand?
So what we see a lot of with social media use is we see a lot of bullying type activities. We see a lot of sexually explicit videos and photos shared through social media, through text messages. And so kids need to realize that when we get to that level, that it can be criminal in nature. And so we have to be careful as parents, as a community, to teach our kids the proper use of social media. To me, social media is like money. It's amoral. It's neither good or bad. It's how you use it that can create problems. So we see, like I said, a lot of bullying, a lot of sexually explicit activity. We see a lot of photos and videos that should concern parents of guns and that type of nature and gang activity on social media. So what we ask is the parents, y'all please be involved in your kids' cell phones. We're seeing kids as young as 5 with cell phones, and they're bombarded by so much social media, and that affects them. And what they see on social media, they're going to repeat because it's popular. So please be in your kids' phones. Talk to them about social media, how to properly use it, what not to share. If they see something that they know is right, something they know is wrong because you've showed them what's wrong, then have them feel comfortable bringing it to you and showing you. We see a lot of threats to schools and to other school children, and they may be innocent. They may not mean anything by it, but it's still considered a threat because of the nature of it. So if your child brings you something and said, Mom or Dad, I'm scared to go to school today because I've seen this on social media, call 911. Let them know. They will get in touch with us, and we will deal with it appropriately the best we can to get ahead of that. So we asked that some of the social media apps that is really popular amongst the kids are Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. The biggest one being Instagram and Snapchat, because your children are talking in groups, and these messages may not be accessible as accessible as you think they are. So you have to be in that device to monitor that before it gets to us, and then that becomes an issue. So also something to be aware of is photo lockers on your children's phones. It looks like an innocent app, like a calculator, when actually you open it and you put in the code that they pick, and it opens up a whole photo vault where pictures can be hidden. Just like I said, monitor your children's devices, be aware of what they're talking about on social media, make them feel comfortable. Let them know that they can come to us if they see something on social media at school, or a child says something on social media, or a text message, that they can come to the SRO, they can come to the administrators and let them know, hey, I just seen this. We want them to feel comfortable coming to us because our utmost number one responsibility is their safety as an SRO unit. So just be aware of what your kids are using. Some protective apps that you can put on your child's phone is Life 360. It's a location app. It'll tell you where they are. If your child's driving, it'll tell you how fast they're driving. It'll tell you how fast they're going, how fast they've been, and you can pick them out, wherever they are. So, and it's also a good location in case they lose their phone. So that's one app. Just Google protective apps for your child's phone. There's thousands. And make sure you utilize those to keep your kids safe. And like I said, just make them feel comfortable that they can come talk to you about it.
Well, I appreciate that. I think it's time to talk to some principals and talk a little bit about, okay, we've heard from professionals in really experted fields, but every day, young people walk onto our school campuses, and we care deeply about the experience and the connection with the family. So, Kristen, start us off with the elementary perspective of how our young children are kind of showing up in your space, and really what you might suggest parents are mindful of in those early years.
So the age in which a child receives a cell phone is becoming increasingly younger every year. I know I can recall back to my first year in administration almost a decade ago, and I remember collecting the cell phones during Georgia Milestones, or then probably CRCT, and we had a few in each classroom, and currently when we get ready to collect the cell phones, it's buckets full of cell phones, and they're nicer cell phones than I own. And with that cell phone comes a level of responsibility and maturity that we hold children accountable for. And so it's not to say that they shouldn't have a cell phone. I don't think any of us are preaching that. I think it just comes, we're talking a lot about responsibility and accountability and just parents being involved. So it connects us with, family who may live out of state. So that's the perks of owning a cell phone, and it connects us to research, for homework and things like that. But what we're seeing at the elementary level, and yes, it does begin at the elementary level, we see the cyberbullying, and we try to get in front of that. We see, things that happen over the weekend that then becomes our problem at the elementary level on a Monday morning. And so Snapchat, it disappears. After they post it, someone can see it, and then it no longer exists. And TikTok also. So I just, again, want to, caution parents that it does begin early. Even you talked a little bit about, Mary Elizabeth, you talked about brain development, childhood brain development. And, I see behaviors that look like almost ADD type behaviors, that inattentiveness, that lack of focusing. Because, even with an iPad if at my school, I don't even want anyone to bring a cell phone. We have no purpose for it. And I know parents sometimes want it for safety. And so we always say, put it away, put it in the book bag, turn it off. But even with iPad usage, we see that distractibility. And then I want to talk a little bit about at home. So sometimes when we, notice that a child's having a bad day, we'll start talking to the student, what happened? How much sleep did you get last night? Well, I was in Big Brother's room. We share a bedroom, and the TV was on all night long, and, his cell phone kept going off, or I kept playing on Roadblocks. That's a big one at the elementary level, Roadblocks. And so, and I think that just, when they're up all night and they have that sleep deprivation, they wake up probably late, they don't get a good breakfast, and it just, they're not set up for success at the elementary level, and these children need the sleep. And so that's what I see in terms of, the behaviors. And then, I guess what I would suggest for parents, and I'm a parent of an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, so I'm right there with my elementary parents in the audience, but it's all about balance. So just that healthy screen time balance. We talked a lot up here already about, on sunny days, get outside and play. If your child doesn't like playing outside, bring out the creative, STEM activities. Let them build, let them draw, let them create, let them discover. All of that's important, and all of that can quickly replace a cell phone. And I know, sometimes we just need, get on this for 5 minutes while I figure out what we're eating for dinner, and that's the reality of it. But let's just work together to encourage children to get outside and play more. I love seeing the bikes at houses, and and that just reminds me of my childhood. I'm really thankful. I want to talk a little bit about just policy IFB that our board has recently adopted, because that policy speaks a lot about digital literacy and healthy screen time balance, even in the school setting. So during the pandemic, and I know we're still, COVID has not gone away, but during hybrid instruction and during remote learning, we relied so heavily on the technology, and we utilized Google Classroom. We utilized all these, digital resources. And so I'm happy to say in my building, we are getting back to a balance of digital and printed resources. And so I'm excited about the regulation that is forthcoming. I think it's going to be great for our schools. So we're doing our part. What I want everyone to know is that we're talking about parents, you need to do this or help us with this. But I want everyone to know that we're also recognizing what we can do at the elementary level. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Maddox in just a moment, but we are working hard together in collaboration to ensure that we set our students up for success. So I've spoken a lot about at the elementary level and what I see, but I'd love to hear from you when they reach adolescence.
Yeah, so same behaviors that the elementary school kids are displaying is the same in high school. And I would just advise parents to monitor your child's technology, that being not just their cell phone, but their laptops, their Chromebooks, the various technologies that they have. Make sure that you monitor those things. This is not popular, but I believe it is to ensure that your family is safe and your child is safe. It's very good to know their passwords. And Jeff talked about you think that you're following your students and you're really not. So why not just look at their cell phones, swipe, look at those different devices that they have, those different apps, log in. If you don't know the password, you need to have that open discussion with your child. Hey, what's the password? You didn't give me this. I didn't know that you downloaded this particular item. So just making sure that you're involved. Also having discussions with your child about the appropriateness of technology. Contrary to popular belief, when students get into high school, Some of them use profanity. Some of them use profanity. I know, breaking news, right? But they use profanity. We need to talk with our children about that's not appropriate when you're communicating with your peers. That's not appropriate when you're communicating with teachers. That's not appropriate when you're talking about your school. So having those conversations about the appropriateness and how to utilize this technology. Also with instigating fights and bullying and them echoing what others have said. Well, that's my friend, I want to back that person up. Well, when we're doing that, that's instigating problems, and then 9 times out of 10, the school does not find out about this until after the fact. And then once they've been involved in a physical altercation or a very loud argument, that's when we find out something happened over the weekend or something happened. When you feel that your child is being harassed, your child is being bullied, you need to contact the school. Don't assume that the school knows. Make sure that we know and make sure that we can actually mitigate that before it becomes physical. So making sure that we are monitoring that technology. Also, when students get into high school, we want to provide them with some freedom. That's not the time to give them freedom. High school is not the time. This is the most important part, along with the K through 12, but we understand when they leave your child's high school, they're going out into the community. So we need to make sure that we're producing productive citizens once they leave high school. So monitor their attendance, monitor their grades, make sure that you're involved in the parent portal. So every time, and I'm a parent, I'm a product, my children are a product of Henry County. And when that teacher puts in a grade, it sends an alert. And you know, so if your child, Johnny, you received a 0. So let's talk about that. So having these conversations with your students, yes, you need to have those conversations with high school students. And while they're in the car on the way home, just recap the day. How was your day? And I think Dr. Hester talked about on a scale of 1 to 10. But having open-ended conversations with your students. Don't allow yes and a no. Having open-end. So how was first period? How was AP US history? How was world history? How was literature? Okay, I know last week you were working on a project. So how we're progressing with this project that's due on whatever day. So having these purposeful conversations, holding your child accountable for what they're doing within the schoolhouse. So making sure that we're doing that. Also setting goals for your children, making sure that this is a checkpoint to make sure that we are there mentally. So a lot of times when they enter high school, 9th grade, I want to go to college, or I want to do this, I want to do this particular trade. Now when they have these shifts, well, I don't want to go to college. This is an opportunity to find out what's going on. Is there some peer pressure there? Is someone swaying my child to go a different route? So if you see behaviors changing and they're no longer wanting to go to college, or I don't want to take this particular trade, that's another opportunity to have these discussions with your children. So monitor that technology, make sure that they're using that technology appropriately, making sure that you're involved in their childhood, their experience as a high school student. Stay involved. When we have parent-teacher conferences, make sure you sign up. I don't care if your child is doing well, make sure. And I said this last week, and I'll say it again, you trust your children, but you have to verify. Trust them, but verify everything to ensure that they're safe, make sure that they're learning at high levels, and making sure that you're involved in the students, the faculty and staff of your particular school, they know that you're involved.
So basically, if any parent who's here tonight has a child who says that it's really too much structure in this house, there's too many expectations, you could say, at least you're not the child of a high school principal. Because if you were, there would be a lot of awareness that you bring into that family environment. And I think that's true. I mean, I think it really is when you are on the educator side and you're balancing parenting your own children, it really becomes a lot of exposure that we now think really probably all parents would want to have in order to then find the right balance and decision making for for your children. All right, so besides really needing some personal counsel from you, Mr. Mattox, I do want to make sure that we also balance our conversation about the physical safety and our campus security techniques and really our student well-being protocols. And Mr. Stafford, you lead our safety and security strategy, and I would love if you could talk just a little bit about what improvements and investments the Board of Education has made following the last time we did this event 4 years ago, and then also really a little bit about the processes that are in place in our schools that every family should know about.
Absolutely, Dr. Davis. Thank you for the opportunity. First thing, I just have to say, the partnership and the collaboration that goes on daily in our district for the well-being and the safety of our young people is remarkable. So hats off to everyone that participates in that. But now when we talk about safety, and I said this last week, when you talk about safety, the data shows that many people don't even think about safety unless they feel unsafe or they think a situation is unsafe. And I said it's kind of equivalent to when we think about air. Unless you're asthmatic or you're having trouble breathing, you're not thinking about air. And the reason that I say that and use that analogy is because that's absolutely opposite of how Henry County Schools looks at safety. It's on the front burner, not the back burner of our agenda. So there are different things that we've done, and some of those investments that I like to speak about. Let's talk about some of the zero-cost investments that came up on a panel just like this that you speak of 4 years ago. And those things were just making sure that building leaders are making sure that exterior doors are closed. That's a standard operational procedure. Someone needs to monitor that. Also, visitors checking in and checking out, having a process for that, not just allowing parents or just anyone to walk into your building. So we made those adjustments. Also, with collaboration with Josh Malcolm, Chief of Facilities and Maintenance, we have some low-cost safety investments. And one is the safety doors that's been installed in all our elementary, middle school, and high schools. This right here allows visitors to only have access to the front office of each school. So no one is going to walk through the lobby and walk into our hallways without first being channeled through our front office. That's remarkable to make sure that you have those things. I remember recalling when they start to install those, I said, this is what we need to do. And again, that came from a setting, a panel just like this. And those are the ideas of the community, and you get to see those things actually in your schools and your children's schools. So that's awesome. We also have some other low-cost safety investments, and those are, we have Angel Track technology. Angel Track technology, that's cameras that's been installed in all of our 300 buses throughout the county. You have a driver's view, you have a windshield view, and you have several student views. And this is 5 to 6 cameras in each bus, depending on the size of the bus. And we have 300 buses. That's awesome as well. We have other low-cost investments. And another low-cost investment would be the access project, the control access project, which is actually a single buzzer system that's protecting and monitoring all exterior doors. All teachers will have badges, key cards to get into access of a school, no matter if it's elementary, middle school, or high school. This is new technology. It's actually being piloted at Dr. Mattox High School and also McDonald Middle School. This grants access to that front office staff to see visitors outside of the school through a camera before they allow them entrance into the school lobby. Just another investment that Henry County Schools is taking part in. But let's talk about some of the long-term investments. And one is our crisis alert system. This empowers our teachers and our administrators with the capability to have instant response from law enforcement, administrators, and other teachers when you have a crisis in the school. Some of those crises could be altercations between students. Some of those crises could be medical situations that occur at schools often. This is something that we have used, and along with SROs, along with even Henry County PD, we've partnered up and had the opportunity to have them to support us when we have crisis. However, I must say that those badges, sometimes, especially with our new teachers, they accidentally hit the button. They could be holding their books or anything, so it's easily, not easily triggered, but sometimes it could be triggered, especially by our new teachers. It's something that occurs. But the last investment, Dr. Davis, that I love to speak about, and it's in collaboration with our Family and Student Support Division that's led by Dr. April Matton, is our mental health wellness facilitators. This is proactive. This is forward thinking. This is Henry County really putting safety on the front of our agenda. This is awesome to have this resource in every school building. That's just not a resource for your students, but also teachers. It doesn't miss the mark in any way, and to have that is phenomenal, and I think that really shows how Henry County is listening to the community and providing and implementing things that be proactive, that causes a safe and well-being environment for our students.
I love how you started off, right, that you don't even think about safety until you feel unsafe. And we believe that many of these investments continue to create that condition of where you never really are thinking about it because you do always feel safe. But if there's ever an instance where a child doesn't or a parent doesn't, we would want that communication to go right to the administrative team so that we can walk through where we need to make an improvement. But I love how you laid that out. And I really love also that while the physical investments have mattered, it's really the human capital that you ended with. It is the people. And we're not leaving one day nor 1 minute of one day to chance. Every single employee is watching in order to ensure young people are being healthy themselves and being healthy towards one another. And we want to keep getting better, which is why we'll have our small group conversation here in a moment. But I do think it's important to acknowledge we have high expectations for student conduct. And Mr. Creary, you lead our approach to student conduct. And all of our kids, 98% of them, well, we got them all back together again. So what do you see happening as far as students and their conduct?
So it's great to see students back in the building, and I'm going to jump off something that Johnny just talked about. He talked about our crisis alert system, and this system is excellent. It was part of the governor's safety grant. It didn't cost taxpayers in Henry County any money, but we were able to install this in all the schools, and it allows anyone in the building to click if there is an emergency situation, if it's an administrative situation, or click for a lockdown situation. If Stoneman Douglas had had a system like this, it would have saved lives. We had a situation where one of our schools, right when this was installed, had what they thought was somebody with a weapon. It ended up not being the case, but they were able to put the entire school on lockdown in 10 seconds. Every student was locked safely behind a classroom door within 10 seconds. That is a technology that, should we ever have to use it, which we hope we never do, will save lives. So we're glad that that is there. Jessica talked about schools being one of the safest places kids can be during COVID. It's also that way physically too. We put safety measures in place where we want to make sure that students are in the safest place they can be. And Ms. Cobb introduced by saying our Board of Education has a core belief and commitment that every learning environment be supportive, safe, and secure. And that includes high standards for student conduct at schools, as Dr. Davis was asking me about. So I'm finally getting around to student conduct here. So we have our students back in school, and when we come together with the community, we have listened and learned and modified our student code of conduct based on the feedback that we've gotten, both to hold students accountable and keep them connected to learning as much as possible. This includes responsive ISS and OSS progressions that minimize lost class time, and I'm going to talk about a program in just a minute that is doing that now, and we will expand that. In response to community voice, we added language about vaping, disruption of virtual classroom, and flexible consequences that avoid zero tolerance policies. OSS and hearing assignments are reviewed by coordinators for possible solutions prior to assignments. So we're trying to do everything we can to keep kids connected and support schools in terms of how they support conduct, because schools are dynamic places. There is a majority of what happens is good, but we do have to have things in place because codes of conduct are necessary. When I was an assistant principal, I would have days where all I was doing was discipline. Conduct after conduct after conduct. And I would have to get out of the office and say, you know what, it isn't this bad. I'm going to walk through the halls and say good every time I see a child that is good. And when you walk in the hall and see good, you just become overwhelmed with the amount of good. And even the students who make mistakes are good. So that 0.1% that is bad, sometimes that seems like it is everything, but it is such a minimal part of what we see. Now, getting into conduct data. 2021 and 2019 are the last two comparable years. You can't compare the data from 2020 like you can 2021 and 2019. When we look at August through now in the school year, we have some really good points about the data that are comparative. One point that did give us a slight increase, we do have more students than we had in 2019, but we did see a slight increase in fights when we came back in August and September. Any new year, you have to renorm things for students, and we had to do that this year. We had students who hadn't been together en masse throughout over a year, so when we all came back together, we did see that slight increase. Now, just like the Braves, in October and November, we had a much better month than we did in August and September. And I will note that we talked about the 40% of our kids that have sleep loss from devices. True. I think 90% of us had sleep loss from the Braves in October. So that's not a point I'm getting into. But conduct data, on the positive side, that fight data is trending lower. And we talked about social media. Jeff, Lieutenant Agan, Kristen, Antonio, all talked about the negative impact of social media. When we do qualitative study of what causes our fights in the schools, most of them emanate from social media outside of school. We will have situations that brew over the weekend, and like we say, first thing, I was a high school principal for 13 years. Monday morning, all of a sudden you see a vibe come into school that is like, where is this coming from? And it comes from social media outside of school. So please, like our panel is saying, pay attention to your kids, trust and verify what they're doing on their social media, and please spread that word to other parents, because the more we can network about that, the better. The good data from 2021 to 2019, we have seen these things, hearings are down, excessive physical violence is down, weapons are down, and sexual misconduct is down. Our students are being better this year than they were the same months 2 years prior when we actually can compare the statistics. So we have had some good things going on there with that. Alternative to suspension program. I mentioned that I was going to talk about something that we keep kids connected to school. We started a pilot for the alternative to suspension program. This is when a child is suspended, they are offered an opportunity. We started with 9th grade, and then we expanded to 10th grade after fall break. When a child is suspended, they are offered an opportunity to go to the alternative to suspension program. This is outside of their school. It has a certified teacher who works with them on their schoolwork. It also, this certified teacher is trained in helping repair harm, helping students take ownership of the root causes for the problems that occurred, and then renewing them to the school environment where hopefully the students are then, with taking ownership of what they've done and repairing the harm, go back to the school, focus on academics, and they don't return to ISS, they don't return to OSS. So that started with 9th grade. After fall break, we expanded to 10th grade. We are going to expand that to 11th and 12th grade very soon, and then we'll expand that to middle school. So this is just one of the things that we're doing to try to keep kids more connected to our schools. So with a combination of being proactive, responsive, and renewing, we are able to keep schools supportive, safe, and secure. So thank you very much, Dr. Davis.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful. I mean, you did end with how we are really starting to think about our role as educators, even in conduct mistakes, and making certain that kids don't get disconnected from learning, even if they need to be removed from an environment temporarily. And so I just think we're going to learn out of the conversation we'll turn into in a moment, even more ways where we keep kids even more connected to their school, because that is the experience we want kids to have in Henry. Now, I do want to just make sure that we round out this conversation because we talked about campus security investments, and then we talked about student behavior. And really, we have a key partner in the Sheriff's Office by the allocation of a student resource officer, school resource officer at each of our schools. We have a very specific reason for that. And Lieutenant Agan, why don't you just elaborate a little bit on how that SRO in a school facility sits in between these two conversations?
Thank you, Dr. Davis. So the role of the SRO, I say SRO, School Resource Officer. The key word in that is resource. The School Resource Officer is a resource. It's a resource for our students. It's a resource for our parents. It's a resource for our staff to rely on. We're not just a cop in the schools. We're so much more than that. So that being said, we take a three-pronged approach to the SRO unit, School Resource Officer unit. The first prong of that is safety and security. That is our number one primary responsibility, is security and safety. Providing a safe learning environment for your students, our students, and providing a safe work environment for our staff so they can do their job, which is educate our students. So that's our number one primary responsibility. And there are several ways we do that. We're available as a resource to respond to a threat, whether it's coming from inside that school or outside that school. And we're an immediate response to that threat. We monitor social media, and I know we've been hounding social media, but the SROs monitor social media. We monitor for those threats. We monitor for that bullying situation. And I would like to, Ms. McGray brought up a good point when she said Roblox. That keyed me into something. A lot of the kids are playing Roblox and some of these other stuff at home. Monitor those too, because you don't know who they're talking to. There are chat rooms within those games and those apps, and there's predators. They're out there looking for your children. And I say that not to scare you, but they're out there. So monitor who they're talking to, because they are out there. Getting back to this safety and security that the school resource officers provide. The individual school resource officer, they talk to the principals, they talk to the administrators to address immediate safety concerns. They're also doing perimeter checks. They're walking around the schools. They're checking for those open doors too. It's not just the teachers and the administrators. It's our responsibility to do that too. We provide security for extracurricular events. If you've been to a football game or a basketball game, you'll see an SRO or several SROs at those games. And we're there for you there too, and our students, to keep them safe. Unfortunately, there are times that we have to investigate and uphold the Georgia state law. That's just part of our job. But there again, too, we're there for safety and security first. The second prong of that three-pronged approach is education. There again, too, we provide that resource to parents, staff, community, and students. The SRO is available to go into a classroom setting or an assembly setting to teach kids about law enforcement topics, safety topics, such as social media safety, such as seatbelt safety for our younger ones. We base these on age-appropriate topics, and education level we might talk about fire safety, or how to get out of your house in a fire, or how to properly use a cell phone and stuff like that. We're also able to meet with parents and students on a one-on-one basis to educate about those topics. If a parent has a concern about their students about to start driving, come talk to the school resource officer. We can, guide you and direct you on how to properly show them how to, if they get pulled over. I pulled students over before and they stop in the middle of the road because they just don't know to pull over the side of the road, which obviously can be a dangerous situation. So, we're there as part of the education. The third prong of that is counseling and mentoring. We work directly with our counselors inside the schools to be available to those students that have suffered some type of trauma out in the community or at home, or they just don't know how to deal with that. They can come and talk to us. The school resource officers have an open door policy. As long as we're not interviewing or talking to someone or working on a case, our door is open. Advise your students, tell your students, your children, that they can come and talk to us. Don't be scared of us. We're available to them for that. If they just need a few minutes to vent, we would rather them come in and talk to us. Even if they yell and scream, and curse. It's okay. We're not going to admonish them for that. If they're going through, we would rather them do that than go out and get in a fight and vent that way. And we want to be a mentor to them. We want to show them how to act properly, how to use social media properly, how to use a cell phone properly, how to drive properly, and be engaged in them. We want to take a positive approach, and we want to build those positive relationships with those students. A positive relationship between law enforcement, the students, law enforcement, the community, law enforcement, and parents. Because we're here to help. We're here to serve. We're here to protect. And that's what the school resource officer is meant to be, and that's what we try to do. Try our best. So.
Well, thank you for that, Lieutenant Egan. As you were talking, I was thinking about all the generations past, even when we were children, right? Adults got together and thought about what are the new things that kids are now testing, right? And then how do we come together as the grown-ups in a community to create the safest possible environment? And that's why I'm proud of Henry County. And that's why I'm proud that we have families and we have practitioners and we have professionals and we have partners who are all saying it's our turn to think about what is our next coordinated step to keep our kids as safe as possible. We know their futures are extraordinary. And I know we're going to wrap up, but I need to ask if Kristen and Antonio, could you just sum up, just talk a little bit about why does this matter? Why do we care? Why are we spending our Wednesday night away from our families, not looking at their phones, in order to really talk in community conversation?
So humans have an instinctive need to belong, and we all need someone to lean into and lean on when we have problems. And children are no exception to that rule. And so I look in this audience and I look at all the parents that are with us tonight, and I think about the responsibility and the trust that you put on us to love and support your young learner. And so we have a moral and ethical responsibility to you, to our community. And so when I think about the young learner that enters at the very early age of kindergarten, they're scared, they're nervous. And so we immediately need to connect them to a caring adult. And so there are tears. My daughter cried the first 6 weeks of kindergarten, so I know all about that. But we can all agree that relationships matter. And so if you take it back to Maslow's hierarchy, we have to ensure that those basic needs are being met. Loving, being loved, belonging, and those physiological needs as well. And so once we can take care of those needs, then we can begin educating our youth. And so if we had a moment, I could go around and ask each and every one of you, who is that teacher that you remember from your childhood? And if you think about that teacher that you loved most, I would put money on it that it goes back to a positive relationship that you had with that teacher. And so at the elementary level, we try to set the student up for success by creating a solid foundation, beginning with connecting them with an adult and building those relationships so that they love school and that they feel connected. And we know that when children feel connected, then we're less likely to see those behavior problems exist in the classroom. We know that when they're connected, that they know that there may be bad days, but they're not bad children. I always, when I'm talking to a child and I'm talking to my staff, I always say, we have an obligation to teach this behavior. It's, as adults, we often think that they should just know. They should just know. No, they don't. It's not part of their schema. It is our responsibility to teach them right from wrong, and we partner with our parents. And so I always tell any child that's in my office, you are not a bad kid. You made a bad choice today, but you are not a bad kid. And so that's the conversations that we have at the elementary level, and we try to instill that and have a solid foundation, and then we hope that when we turn them over after our 6 years of being with them to the middle school and high school years, that they still have that love for learning, and then they have that connected adult. And so, Mr. Maddox, I'd love to hear, your perspective about why does all of this matter?
It matters because we need to think about the end game. So we talk about a child going through a K-12 experience, and when they get to the secondary level, we have to begin to think about the end game. This matters because not only is this protecting your child, it's protecting your family. It's protecting your posterity. It's protecting your future. And so we have to make sure that we're investing the time that's necessary for our students to be successful. Because not only will this impact them as successful adults, but it will impact their children as well. So think about our posterity and those students that are coming after your children come through. So it matters. So knowing and being involved with that is very important. I believe in the 3 E's. So every student that matriculates through McDonough High School will have to have a post-secondary plan. They have to know what they're going to do once they leave McDonough High School. And I'm pretty sure all the high schools in Henry County. And I call them the 3 E's. You're going to have a plan. It's enrolling, you're going into college. It's enlisting, you're going to the military, or employment. Now, when I speak about employment, no knock against McDonald's, Wendy's, all of this. But when I'm talking about employment, trade, and learning some skills, ultimately, we want our kids out of our house. Can we agree? Yeah. So ultimately, if we want them out of our houses, we cannot do that working at Wendy's, Zaxby's, McDonald's. So we needed to aim a little bit higher. So when they talk about these low, no knock. Now, that's fine if they're doing that while they're in high school. But once they leave and matriculate through a Henry County school, we've taught them those soft skills that they are ready for the workforce and to be productive and ultimately out of your house and making sure that they're providing for themselves. So this is why it's important.
The 3 E's.
3 E's.
Excellent. Well, it really is also about our young people seeing their future full of success and brightness, just like we see them. And this has been great to have a conversation. We hope it sort of brought some awareness to the overall effort and belief of our Henry County Schools community, but it's only possible when the dialogue is turned and we start to hear from you. So we are at the conclusion of what we've prepared to share with you, but we are going to stick around and be a part of the dialogue that happens in the room, and I'm going to turn this over to JD in order to give you some instructions on how we turn the conversation and listen to you. Go ahead, JD.
Thank you very much. Let's give our panelists one more big round of applause, please.